Hello and welcome to Politics South East. In the next half hour, as families prepare for energy bills to rise again this week, we'll explain the government's new price cap and ask what you can do to make sure you're getting the support you're entitled to. 9 years since Brighton MP Caroline Lucas was arrested at an anti-fracking protest in Sussex, we'll ask whether the government is right to lift the ban on drilling for shale gas and oil. And we'll be in Bexhill finding out how energy prices are going to affect the price of chippy chips. And joining me for the whole programme are Karen Constantine, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Group on Kent County Council, and Jeremy Kite, who's the Conservative Leader of Dartford Borough Council. We're going to start with energy prices, which are set to rise again from next Saturday. That's the 1st of October. Here's Marcella Whittingdale.
We got 5 children, mayhem of a house. Very, very hectic. Anything from 4:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night.
As a family of 7, it's safe to say the Vanners from Brighton are pretty switched on when it comes to energy use. But despite working 10-hour days, Dad Russell's not sure how they'll manage come October when bills go up.
I've got the fridge freezer, the cooker, the microwave, I've got washing machine tumble dryer, the kettle, the toaster. You know, they all go on and they're everyday usage. Phones being charged up, their tablets being charged up, etc. You know, it's all these little things, you know.
Even though the government's new energy price guarantee means bills won't be rising as much as feared, households in the South East are still facing prices which are roughly double what they were last winter.
It's worrying because I have had my letter saying how much it's going up by, etc., and how much they reckon a week extra I'm going to be spending on my gas and electric. So I'm thinking to myself, you know, we've got to sort of like cut back on a couple of things, you know, maybe no takeaway in a month now. You know, we used to treat the kids to a takeaway. Maybe that's going to have to stop, for instance, just to allow to pay for the extra electric and gas.
The energy price guarantee replaces the old energy cap, the highest amount suppliers are allowed to charge homes for every unit of energy they use. It means a typical family will see dual fuel bills jump to around £2,500 a year. Households will get a £400 energy rebate. Russell says while that's very welcome, it won't be enough.
We're saying, right, OK, it's get cold, we're going to have trousers, a jumper, maybe a dressing gown over you. Then if we're cold, then we're thinking about putting heating on just for half an hour.
Like many families, the Vanners are managing. But with winter just around the corner, they know the only way they'll keep on managing is by choosing what to cut back on next.
Joining us is Alan Bruzon. Alan is Chief Executive of Citizens Advice in Eastbourne. Alan, we hear so much about this so-called price cap. And even this morning, Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, was talking about capping average families at £2,500. That's not strictly true, is it? It's about capping the unit of price. Just explain to us how it works.
Well, you're absolutely right there. It is about capping the unit prices for gas and electricity. It doesn't mean that the maximum that a household will pay will be £2,500. It means that on average, that will be the highest amount based on those charges for the unit cost and the standing charge.
OK,
per
so
day.
the more you use, the more you'll pay. That remains true, does it?
That's right. If you're a high energy user, you can expect your bills to go up higher than that £2,500 mark. Obviously, if you spend less than that, if you use less, you're not going to be all pushed up to that one price point.
I mean, the concept of an average household is a strange one. I mean, there are lots of people who will use more than that, aren't there, for various reasons? Yeah,
absolutely. But people with health conditions and disabilities that rely on electrical appliances will need to use more electricity, particularly.
Yeah.
And that is a concern that people have already been telling us, that they're worried about how they're going to be able to afford their bills going forward and what effect that might have on their health.
I mean, I've got the chart here of different things like what it costs to put a typical washing machine round for a load, and gas showers, a 10-minute shower. I'm going to have to tell my teenage daughters about this. 48p for a 10-minute. I mean, actually, these are quite useful things that people can find, aren't they, to make decisions if they can limit their use safely.
Yeah, there are a lot of different energy-saving tips available at the moment. They're all worth looking into. It depends on your family situation, your individual circumstances, and always something related to the structure of the building that you're in, how difficult your home is to actually retain heat. Otherwise, you're spending extra money and most of that heat is going straight out of drafty windows, etc.
Let's talk about the help that's available. Let's start with the £400 for everybody to help with energy bills. How is it going to be paid out?
Well, I must say, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that the £400 is going to be divided into 6 monthly instalments, starting with £66 in October and November, and then followed by £67 January, February and March. It can be paid in a number of different ways depending on how you pay for your energy. So if you're on direct debit, for example, they can make a credit into your account or make a refund directly into your bank account. If you're paying directly by cheque or by cash card, then they can also give a credit which will appear on your account.
What about people who have to prepay for their energy?
They've got a couple of different options and they should be writing to people about this, how they're going to do this now. So it could be a credit that goes directly through the electronic system onto your meter, or they can send you a voucher which you can use at the usual place where you top up.
What about people who struggle to pay their bills? Do you think people will be cut off? I mean, clearly some people already have got to the situation where they've been put on a prepayment meter. I mean, essentially, if they can't afford to add money, they're going to end up cut off by some measure, aren't they? But what's going to happen to people who find themselves in that situation? Well,
it's worrying to predict because this will affect more people, but being disconnected is a reality of non-payment of bills. It shouldn't happen suddenly or unexpectedly. It should happen after a period of negotiation with the energy supplier who's going to try and come up with a way for you to repay things. They often will want to install prepayment meters, but for most people on prepayment meters, they're already used to having periods of time when they haven't got money to put on that meter and their electricity or others effectively does stop.
What about other support? I mentioned the £400. What other support are people entitled to?
Well, there are a range of different measures that the government have introduced. So there was £150 which was paid to people through the council tax system back in April and May. There's the £400 to come through. There is, I think, another £650 available for disabled people, which would come through the benefits system. And there is one other amount, which I can't remember exactly how much that is, about £300. So in total, if you were to receive all of those, it adds up to something like £1,200 in terms of support that is available.
Just a quick thought, before the prices even go up again next Saturday, what's happening to your clients, the people of Eastbourne?
Well, a lot of people are very worried at the moment, increased demand for our services. Most people are contacting us saying that they don't have any money at that particular time. They need help paying for food, paying for daily essentials, and that's something that we're available to try and find solutions to. OK,
stay with us, Alan. Let's bring our politicians in. Jeremy, first of all, how would you rate Liz Truss's response to rising bills?
Well, I think it's been a combination. I think if you look at the Vanna family there, they would have benefited from things before Liz and the early stages of the issue, right through now to the things that we've heard about from Citizens Advice. I think actually the response has been good, but I do think it's about what happens next. It's about this timeline, particularly on business. I know we could talk about businesses later, but there seems to be a different sort of timeline for businesses. The 2-year certainty on these benefits, I think, is very helpful, and I think for the Vanna family particularly that will be useful. But I mean, this is an unprecedented crisis, and what's interesting, I think, is that the government are responding quickly, perhaps not quickly enough for some, and perhaps not as much as some would like. But I do think the help is out there, and I'm quite pleased from a point of view. And also, it's not the only thing. The councils themselves, we're involved in councils. I don't know about other councils, but Dartford's also responding. So those kind of health, those immediate food emergencies, we're there for them as well. OK,
let me put all of those points then to Karen for Labour. Jeremy says the government's responding quickly and the help is out there. Is he right?
No, I'm afraid not. And when I answer that question, the people that I've got in my mind are the young people in the wards that I represent, where child poverty is running at 39% already and it keeps growing. And I think, so how do they manage? How do we look after those people? How do we look after the elderly? Some of whom don't access these services for a whole raft of reasons. We saw a massive amount of delay with regard to the budget that we've just had, and we've frankly seen a budget which has rewarded the rich and penalised the poor. And we are looking at a situation where it could be that we have increased inflation, that we have increased cost of living costs going up and up and up, increased mortgages, rents, etc. Where does that leave people?
Okay.
This won't help.
Okay, you've mentioned the budget, so let's put that back to Jeremy. The government has announced these tax cuts this week, the Go for Growth plan. But the biggest winners are people who earn over £150,000. Is that right when so many people on low incomes that Karen's just alluded to are suffering?
Well, Keir Starmer's announced about half an hour ago that he's going to support most of the tax cuts. He's not going to object
He said
to
he'd
them.
reinstate the 45.
He said he'd reinstate the 45. You need to be clear, high-earning taxpayers already pay at 40%, so there was another band which put us way out of line with most other European countries and uncompetitively with them. So the 45 barrier has gone down to 40% for high earners. High earners do pay much more tax than ordinary and low earners.
Well, hold on a second. If you earn £150,000 right up to and including multiples of millions, you don't pay any more than somebody on £50,000 in terms of a percentage now.
But the progressive part of it means that you've paid more to get there. And also, I have to say, I think what was interesting about the budget, I don't know we can talk about it later on, but the interesting about the budget was that it was actually not the usual kind of budget. It didn't talk about fags and cigarettes and wine and all that kind of stuff, not at the front of it. It talked about a different way of approaching the economy, and they've gone absolutely for growth.
And that approach largely is a gamble. Even that's not me saying it, that's the Financial Times and the CBI and other organisations are saying this is a gamble. This isn't actually a strategy for growth. This is the potential for a strategy for growth. And it could be that we revert back to what we had in the 80s, which is boom and bust. So you interfere with the market. You've seen the pound. We all saw those terrible graphs, the pound devalued against the dollar, the worst rate for 37 years. Does that look like a success? Because it doesn't look like a success from where I'm sitting. And it's not just the poorest, it's not just those people that are on universal credit and those people that are on a fixed income like pensioners. It's the bottom 12% earners of the country, many of whom are working, couples doing 2 jobs, who are going to struggle. The value of the budget to them is around about 280 to the top earners, £8,500.
Let me just really quickly on this go back to Alan, because we've talked about the budget, we've talked about the help, but interest rates rose again this week. That's going to have an impact too, mortgages and rents in the months to come.
Yeah, that is a concern, that those additional costs of buy-to-let mortgages are going to be passed on to renters. And obviously amongst this there are people whose housing costs are paid by the universal credit and housing benefit, and those rates, local housing allowance rates, haven't increased to keep in line with these the interest rates.
Alan, thank you so much. Let's go on to businesses now in the southeast and how they're going to be affected by soaring energy costs. Stavros Lianos owns Marino's Fish and Chips in Bexhill, and he joins us now. Stavros, lovely to have you on the show. We spoke in May. How have things changed since then?
Good morning. Since May, during summer, to be honest, been quite good, been busy. Wasn't a lot of effect about the bills, energy bills, because obviously more busy, we can manage to pay the bills. The question is what's going on from now for the winter. This is a big question for us.
Stavros, the government has announced support for small businesses, but will it help you?
Personal, me not, because I have to renew my energy bills before April this year, so won't benefit me this.
So what does that mean for this winter? I've looked on the government's website and they say if you already fixed your energy bills before the 1st of April, you won't be exposed to the recent rises in wholesale prices. Does that mean everything will be fine for you this winter or not?
I hope it's going to be okay. It's always winter we struggle because it's not so busy like summer, as I said earlier. So we struggle winter. So this winter, the first few months is going to be the key for the next few years. If we can survive a small business, or we need to do anything else. For the moment, we have to wait. It's not anything really we can do.
OK. Stavros, I really do wish you and your staff all the best through this winter. Difficult to adjust your energy usage when you've got to keep the fryers on. Tim Aker joins us now. Tim is from the Federation of Small Businesses in Kent. Tim, what about businesses where you are? I mean, let's take your... what's happening to businesses like Stavros right across the southeast? You've just given one example, but what different stories are you hearing?
Well, we're hearing that the announcement on Friday was greeted with some optimism by small businesses that something has finally been done. The good shouldn't be the enemy of the perfect, and there's a lot that can still be done. We're asking for reductions in VAT, business rates, fuel duty. But the big thing for us, and we've lobbied hard on this, is the reversal of the national insurance increase. We're delighted with the changes to IL35, which is going to help lots of freelancers and contractors. So if this was a mini budget, I can't wait for the full budget.
OK. What does the government need to do next then?
It needs to give businesses some reassurance that this 6-month energy price freeze will be extended. Businesses don't plan for 6 months, they plan for a year, 18 months. So we need some reassurance and certainty on that. Some movement on fuel duty would be welcome, some movement on business rates and VAT would give businesses a shot in the arm to not just get through this winter, but to get through next year as well.
The government has said, I was looking on their website this morning, that there will be a review in 3 months' time, and that there will be, at the end of the 6 months, whatever they decide, it will be seamless. It will carry on with no gap. Does that comfort you?
A government review is the most terrifying phrase you could hear, because that brings the question of it being kicked into the long grass. Businesses don't want to wait until 5 to midnight for a decision to be made. They're making their plans for next year already. So we need the government to not have a review, realise that this has been warmly welcomed by the business community, extend it so that they've got time to widen the supply to bring energy prices down without a cap. That's the strategy we've seen from it. That's what they should be upfront with the business community and say as soon as possible.
Thanks, Tim. Really great to talk to you as well. Tim talking to us, obviously, from Stavros's Chippy in Bexhill. Let's bring the politicians back in. Karen first, what's happening to your local Chippy and other small businesses?
It's a mixed picture. So I've got one local brewer, fantastic brewery. They already took steps for sustainability. They introduced some solar panels, etc. I've got another business who has fixed their rate and they're feeling okay. Meanwhile, I've seen a couple of places close down. I'm very aware that people aren't going out to spend money. People are saving, you know, they're putting cash aside. They're worried about the cost of living crisis. I mean, this issue of the budget, or whatever it was, the fiscal event, has not been well received. In my opinion, by the vast majority of people, there is real concern and real worry, and that will dampen the spend. We've already seen that. People, the supermarkets, the clothes shops, etc. The spend has gone right down.
Let's just stay for a moment, if we may, with energy costs and local businesses. Let me put the same question to you, Jeremy. What are you hearing from chip shop owners or whatever other businesses you talk to?
Well, look, listen, I was pleased with what Tim said, and I agree with him. I think, as I said before, I think the problem with business support is it tends to be a shot of adrenaline when what you really need is a bit of constancy, a bit of security. So I'd like to see the government move a bit further and say this is going to be there for 12 months, 24 months to give them time to plan. Now, Karen and I can start an argument about almost anything, but let me say I think we probably would agree on something, and that is using local businesses is the key to this. We must get out there and start using local businesses. We all spend money on lots of things, Amazon and big businesses. Let's use local firms. It can help because they need our support.
She's sort of half agreeing with you.
I think it was, you know, I live in a coastal town. We're already doing that. We've already been in that zone for quite a long time, spending money locally. We do the Saturday.
So no one uses Amazon?
They do use Amazon, but we do support our local businesses. That is already happening. That is not going to be enough. People are concerned that the value of the pound in their pocket is going down, that they have less money to spend than what they do have. They're having to put by because they've got to meet rising energy bills. We've got a massive housing crisis in Thanet, as you know. We can't put roofs over enough people's heads. So we are in some parts of the country, maybe it's okay in wealthy, leafy suburbs across Kent, but honestly in the coastal communities, in the more deprived areas, People are struggling, and
Well,
this
there are
policy
poor people
did
in
nothing
leafy
for them.
areas as well.
I'm
right,
sure,
across the
yes,
county.
I'm sure.
So some businesses like Stavros want to see a cut in VAT. Can I just ask you both really quickly, Jeremy first, is it possible? How would it be
I think the problem with VAT is that VAT is one of those taxes which actually works very fairly when the economy is running really smoothly. We've had a real crisis now. If you abandon VAT and start to use VAT as a tool, I think you'll regret it when the economy picks up.
VAT?
I think if you put it up and put it down again, businesses don't know where they are and people don't know where they are, and we're in a crisis because we've had 12 years of Conservative rule that's led us down a cul-de-sac.
Oh,
and
Karen.
Here we are, and I'm making a serious point.
Well, I am too,
Okay.
but there's no answers there, is there? It's all very well with this rhetoric, but there's no answers there.
Well,
Keir Starmer has not today said anything that's particularly revolutionary. He's taken off that top rail
He's
tax.
done one short interview. He's got a whole. He's
had some days to do it. He did, on his feet, he didn't say very much.
Well, if there is anything, it's super exciting. We'll definitely talk about it on the show next week.
It is super exciting.
Let's talk about where our energy is going to come from in the future. That's our next topic, because the government has lifted the ban on fracking for oil and gas. But is it a good idea?
I look forward to him and his colleagues explaining his charter for earthquakes to the people of Lancashire, Yorkshire, the Midlands, Sussex, Dorset, and indeed Somerset, who will be part of his dangerous experiment. Let me tell the party opposite. We will hang this broken promise round their necks in every part of the country between now and the next general election.
We have, all of us, constituents with gas boilers, and we are going to have them for many years to come. Do we really want them to be dependent on strange dictatorships that wage war in this world? Or do we want to have our own security, our own supplies? Do we want to maximise what we receive from the North Sea and what we receive from underneath our feet? This seems to me, Mr. Speaker, to be just good common sense.
Just good common sense. OK, let's talk about fracking now with Dr. Simon Evans from the energy website Carbon Brief. Can we just start with a quick reminder? What is fracking and how is it used, Simon, to create energy?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So normally people think about oil and gas reservoirs under the ground as, effectively like a big pool of oil or gas. You drill a well into the ground and the oil and gas comes up. But shale gas and oil is different, because it's trapped within kind of crumbly rock. So if you drill into it, nothing happens. So what you do with fracking is you effectively drill a long well through the shale rock, and you pump lots of water into it under high pressure, and that's why it's called hydraulic fracturing. So effectively breaking the rock apart with high pressure water, and that releases the oil and gas to come out of your well.
How much potential for fracking is there in the southeast?
So, I mean, one of the report that people in support of fracking normally point to is the British Geological Survey did a report in 2013, and they looked at effectively a desk-based study. They didn't go out around the country drilling wells to test. They looked at existing reports about what might be under the ground, and they found significant potential for gas, particularly in the northeast, and for shale oil in the southeast. One slight problem with that is that a subsequent study from the BGS published in 2019 suggested there was actually far less shale gas and oil available than previously thought.
So how significant is this week's announcement? Some people have talked about it as a sort of posturing, really, about fracking. Are the companies involved going to take advantage, do you think, of this opportunity?
So I think it's worth putting in perspective what's been decided. We've effectively had a decade of attempts to get shale gas industry off the ground in the UK, with very strong support from government, despite widespread public opposition, and that effectively didn't go anywhere. So although it was ended by the moratorium in 2019 when there were seismic events in Lancashire. Really the industry hadn't got off the ground. So there's a couple of question marks. First of all, is it going to go anywhere? Is it going to go anywhere quickly enough to affect people's bills? People are facing high energy bills this winter. It's an acute crisis, and shale gas would take years to get off the ground. Furthermore, there's an election in 2 years, and there's in my mind, a big question mark over whether companies are going to invest millions of pounds in trying to develop an industry that it's quite likely a Labour government would not support.
Just really briefly, is there any energy we could generate that would tackle bills right now?
Yeah, so there's a range of measures that the government could be taking and that people in their own homes could be taking to, to limit their bills this winter, and, much more quickly than could be done with a shale gas industry. So there's things like people could adjust the flow temperatures on their boilers. This is a really quick thing to do. It takes like less than a minute and can save 6% on your gas bill. People could be looking at insulating their homes. The government could be looking at giving more support for insulation. And things like, onshore wind and solar, 9 times cheaper than generating electricity from gas, and could be brought on stream much more quickly as well.
OK, great. Stay there, Simon. If we've got time, we'll come back to you. But to our politicians now. Jeremy, is the government right to lift the ban on fracking?
I'm not a fan of fracking. I always make a pledge when I come on your show that I will always say it as I see it, and I'm not a fan of fracking, but that, if I'm honest, is because I don't really understand the science, and I do think there needs to be a following of the science. At the moment, I don't think it's a great idea, and I don't think populations want it.
Well, this guy understands the science, so
Yeah.
what has he made you think about it?
Well, I don't trust him very much.
That's a joke. It's hard to tell down
It's a
to.
joke. It's a joke, my friend. I think what we need to see is a proper, reasoned attack at it to see whether it is a future or not.
Karen?
It's a complete red herring, right? We're not going to frack in this country. There would be far too much public opposition to it. It's going to be very difficult to frack. I do understand the science. I have looked at it. It's impossible. We're not going to get the results that they got in America. And today, we've had Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, introducing a new policy, which is to double offshore wind, triple solar power and quadruple onshore wind. And to do that by 2030, so we've got complete energy sustainability and that we can also export.
Right now, your party's not in power. His party is.
Yeah.
So let's talk about consent to fracking, because if fracking is allowed, then there was some sense that people would be allowed to give consent. What should that look like, whether you like it or not, Jeremy?
Well, I don't think you're going to get to that point. I kind of agree with Karen, really. I don't think... I mean, the notion that populations are going to say yes to fracking, even in return for money, is not going to happen. I think what we need is a much longer-term approach to our energy needs. I think we've all been guilty, and I'll be honest, Karen's made a couple of political points. Let me make a quick one.
Yep.
I grew up in the 70s and 80s when Labour were fighting the closure of coal mines. Now they fight the opening of coal mines. We can all be in the wrong side of the agenda occasionally. What we've got to do is have a very long-term plan, and I think actually the government's plan on carbon neutrality is about 5 years behind what Starmer has launched this morning as a brand new idea. 5 years later will be. But so I think there's a bit there's more consensus than perhaps we realise in this area.
Right, we've talked wind, we've talked shale gas and oil, we've talked conventional carbon energy. Simon, nuclear. What's your response to the word nuclear power?
Well, it's obviously something that the government's supporting very strongly. The UK is currently building the Hinkley Point C nuclear plant in Somerset, and the government's hoping to get a kind of sister plant to that, Sizewell C in Suffolk, over the line during this Parliament. I think the issue with nuclear is that it is fundamentally it's more expensive and slower to build than renewables. But having said that, there may still be a place for it in in a net zero energy mix.
We've been talking about small modular reactors in Kent for a while now. Just a really quick thought. Dungeness, good location for something like that?
Well, obviously, there used to be a nuclear plant there, so that obviously lends itself to future siting of reactors. I think the issue with small nuclear reactors is that none of them have regulatory approval yet. We're talking about these targets of 2030 or 2035, from Labour and from the government, where we need to decarbonise our electricity system, and an option like SMRs, where they're not yet actually commercially available, doesn't really lend itself to meeting those very very soon targets.
Simon, thank you very much. It's very rare to do this, but you don't get a say at the end because we've run out of time. We'll have you both on very soon.
I do trust Simon.
I'm glad to hear it. Thank you for watching. We're back next weekend. Have a lovely week.